Dead Money represents a change in design for Fallout New Vegas. Whilst the base game does have its fair share of creepy moments and unexpectedly frightening enemy encounters, its inherently whimsical nature keeps it tethered, preventing it from fully entering genuine horror territory. But Dead Money is the exception to this. Obsidian Entertainment's first DLC for Fallout New Vegas was designed with a specific intention: to embrace the scary aspects of the series, to create an experience that positions the horror as the focal point. On a blog post on Obsidian's website, Chris Avallone, the writer and project lead of Dead Money, explained, "Dead Money's a brutal, vicious adventure that puts the player in a bad situation, and it was designed to scare the hell out of Fallout players." He continues stating, "As for horror, things get scarier and tense when you can't escape. No one's coming to help you, and your resources are limited, and Dead Money was built around this." This design philosophy of trapping the player into a single location may sound familiar if you've played games like Alien Isolation or Dead Space. And it's clear that from its earliest conception, Obsidian's development team had a strong vision for what they wanted their first downloadable content experience to be: to give players a self-contained story which simultaneously turns Fallout New Vegas into a horror game.
"You won't escape this place alive. I'd shatter every one of your limbs to splinters and leave you here."
Upon release, it received a mixed reception, something the blog post also addresses. From the community's perspective, Dead Money was an acquired taste. But in this video specifically, I want to look at what it got right for fans of the horror genre and how it uses horror motifs to create a tense, unsettling, and sometimes surprisingly frightening experience.
Has your life taken a turn? Do troubles beset you? Has fortune left you behind? If so, the Sierra Madre Casino, in all its glory, is inviting you to begin again. Join us. Let go and leave the world behind at the Sierra Madre grand opening this October. We'll be waiting.
Out in the Mojave Wasteland, a mysterious broadcast is heard. A pre-war message inviting players to the grand opening of the Sierra Madre Casino. Following the quest marker, we're led to a small metal grate on the ground, an abandoned Brotherhood of Steel bunker. Upon entry, we're greeted by blood trails and a headless corpse. Obsidian used this environmental design to juxtapose the friendlier tone of the broadcast message. Whilst the voice on the radio signal feels inviting, this location and its deceased inhabitant connote the opposite effect. It creates a foreboding atmosphere while simultaneously confirming any suspicions we brought along with us. To compound this further, we're given a warning from the developers, asking us to check our preparedness for the dangers that await. This introductory sequence ends with a loud operatic score, the kind that typically accompanies a scary moment within a horror film, as we suddenly fall unconscious and our journey into Dead Money begins.
But getting to it, that's not the hard part. It's letting go.
Upon awakening, it won't take long before you realize how unfamiliar the surrounding environment has become. An effective technique used for horror storytelling is an initial reliance on using ambiguity to raise questions and in turn, elevate our suspense. Obsidian follow this enigmatic approach by knocking the player unconscious prior to transitioning to the Sierra Madre. As such, we're given many unanswered questions from the beginning, mysteries surrounding how and why we were transported, how far away did our captors take us, why the surrounding area is covered by a thick red fog, and who our holographic host is.
Are you listening? Good. From now on, when I talk, listen and follow my instructions.
Or if you're familiar with the Brotherhood of Steel story in the base game, why is our host Father Elijah, and for what purpose is he here? The ambiguous nature of the player's arrival not only creates a sense of unease through our relinquished control of the situation, but it also raises our intrigue to motivate us forward to obtain some answers. Although questions are not the only thing we've woken up with, An important aspect of horror game design is creating player vulnerability. In a game like Fallout New Vegas, making the player feel vulnerable is not a straightforward endeavor, as by the time we access this DLC, the player character is likely to be of a high level and possess a collection of powerful weapons and armor. Obsidian wastes no time in providing a solution to one half of this design challenge, by stripping the player of their equipment during the transition to the Sierra Madre. Therefore, we are unable to rely on any of the gear we've obtained from our previous adventures, which immediately positions the player in a weakened state. The other half of this challenge is to address the player's high level, and the increased number of distributed skill points and perks which aid combat effectiveness. Obsidian achieved this through the introduction of new gameplay mechanics, one of which we learn about during our initial conversation with Father Elijah.
Play stupid. Play clever. Make the mistake of saying no. That collar on you never go off and take your hymn with it.
Similar to the victims in the Saw franchise, we've woken up with a trap attached to our body, an explosive collar designed to detonate if we disobey our host's orders. And whilst Father Elijah is not quite the malignant antagonist that Jigsaw is, his approach to encourage us to follow his demands remains very much the same. And unfortunately for us, the bomb collar is not just a narrative device to aid Obsidian's depiction of Father Elijah. Positioned at various points throughout the level design are radios. Radios that emit a frequency which interferes with the bomb collar, causing it to malfunction and detonate if the player remains in close proximity for too long. This wasn't Elijah's intention, but it does create a new threat to contend with that wasn't present in the base game. And when relating directly back to the player character's level, no amount of damage threshold or resistance perks are enough to prevent the immediate and explosive fail state caused by the collar's activation. Therefore, this mechanic forces even the most experienced couriers to slow down, to be ever mindful of the radios that might be hidden around the corners. This creates tension when exploring environments, which is shortly followed by escalating panic whenever the collar starts beeping. These are two emotional responses that are intentionally evoked by the developers and are an important aspect of any effective horror media. Another new mechanic found only in Dead Money is the cloud of red fog that surrounds the Sierra Madre.
It is the cloud covering the building. The longer you are outside, the more its toxins seep into your system, through the llamas and the skin.
From a visual design perspective, this greatly contributes to the unique aesthetic and horror atmosphere presented by this DLC. Wandering through streets blanketed by a thick fog may even evoke a sense of familiarity, especially if you've played games from a specific horror franchise. From a gameplay perspective, it once again puts player vulnerability at the forefront of the experience, as spending too much time wandering the fog-covered streets causes the player's health to gradually decline. Exploration therefore becomes a careful balance of efficient movement and health management, but also in this weakened state, the average combat encounter becomes more frightening and challenging than in the base game, due to the consistent drain of the player's hit points. It contributes to Dead Money's change in approach by tailoring and aligning the exploration mechanics to reflect the sort of experience you'd expect from a horror game. Your playstyle is less about charging in head-on with an offensive attack, and more about taking a measured approach by assessing the situation first, perhaps deciding to use alternate means such as a greater reliance on sneak attacks or consuming items that temporarily buff your stats to maintain the edge in combat. Resource management is likewise an important element of horror games, survival ones specifically. This mechanic is used to starve the player of important supplies, such as healing items and ammunition, to restrict our offensive capabilities. Dead Money once again borrows from this approach. Whilst the base game already requires a certain degree of inventory organization, this DLC takes it a step further by limiting the number of supplies found in the environment and changing the item procurement system. Weapon, ammunition, and stim packs are not commonplace around the Sierra Madre, and with no traders or shops, we're required to use the location's vending machines to resupply. The caveat being that the vending machines don't accept bottle caps as currency, so those big New Vegas casino wins from the high luck gambling exploit won't help you here. And even if you do accumulate a large number of Sierra Madre credit chips, these vending machines won't sell anything that you haven't found the item code for. This scarcer quantity of resources and higher barrier to resupply are not dissimilar from the economy systems found in aforementioned games like Dead Space. Its limiting design also has a direct impact on the gameplay by emphasizing the survival aspect of survival horror, as every round fires feels more precious and consequently, every shot missed feels more wasteful. There's also a greater sense of relief and gratitude whenever you open a container that contains stim packs. Or if, like myself, you play New Vegas on hardcore mode, a desperately needed bottle of purified water. If you're familiar with my Silent Hill 2 video, you may remember a relatively crude analogy I like to use to assess the pacing of a horror game. By their design, horror games have a slower pace. This pace is gradually escalated by building suspense and tension, almost like the steady draw of an arrow against a bow, until a frightening moment occurs when the arrow releases. The fear generated from this moment is determined by how effective a developer is at incrementally ramping up the pressure beforehand. Whilst Dead Money has very few moments that you could consider truly frightening in the same way as a jump scare, it does utilize the first half of this analogy. The aforementioned changes and features, such as the bomb collar, cloud of red fog, and limited number of resources, all act as speed limiters to slow down progression and in turn, the game's pace. The crawling pace by which this DLC sets results in players paying more attention to the creepy and uninviting sights and sounds of the Sierra Madre. And whilst one of the main attractors of Fallout New Vegas is its open world structure, Dead Money makes significant changes by prioritizing linearity over player freedom. The DLC funnels us into narrow pathways and handcrafted interior locations, with a central area surrounding the fountain acting as a hub to return to. It's a design choice that poses both drawbacks and advantages, something I think directly links to Dead Money's mixed reception. But for horror specifically, I believe it has a positive effect. Linearity allows Obsidian to once again gain greater control over the DLC's pacing and horror tone in a number of ways. By restricting access to story-specific areas, a tighter narrative can be told, as certain locations will only unlock once their prerequisite quests have been completed. This allows Obsidian to structure the order and visual backdrop of key moments in Dead Money's story, ensuring they connote the desired theme and reaction from the player.
The Sierra Madre. Beauty, isn't she? She the one who invited you here?
The narrower, more focused level design contributes greatly to the slower pacing, as through careful coordination with the placement of previously mentioned fog and radios, the player's ability to progress is impeded.
Leave well enough alone.
The ability to curate the number of enemies, cover, and elevations in the environment contribute to the horror-centric balance of combat difficulty. And finally, greater control over the player's cone of vision and movement direction allows Obsidian to position Dead Money's visual and audio cues with specificity, emphasizing the more frightening aspects of the setting. Bringing us to a new location also brings along new companions. With the setting of Dead Money feeling so uninviting, you're given the opportunity to meet characters who will accompany you on the journey. But when designing these new faces, Obsidian ensured they maintained their horror theming, as the individuals you recruit are nuanced, layered with disturbing backstories and darker shades to their personalities. Dog or God is a great example of this.
Dog is the beast. We simply change cages, like the ones here.
Referred to by Father Elijah as the FEV reject, This character is one that represents a haunting loss of reality, a psyche fractured by the hardships of mutant life in the wasteland, with two personalities emerging and wrestling for control. From a narrative standpoint, dialogue with Dog and God is engaging, with both sides offering distinctly different responses to the player. But whereas usually traveling with a companion offers some comfort, being in this character's presence feels unnerving. This is compounded by their external visual design, which has connotations of self-inflicted harm used to represent the internalized struggle between Dog and God and their desperate cling to consciousness. It creates sympathy for the character whilst ensuring that any emotional reassurance gained from traveling with this extended party member beyond their offensive capabilities is minimal.
Dog getting full.
This is carried through with the other companions as well, such as Dean Domino, who you're rarely given a reason to trust with confidence, as he repeatedly expresses a motivation to act within his own self-interest.
Like Sinclair, people are the architects of their own misfortunes. Leave themselves wide open for someone to waltz right in and take what they want. As long as they take a single step into the trap, get a few pictures, get a little dirt, and that person's your piano.
He's a twisted individual with a questionable past. As a ghoul who performed at the casino in his former life, Dean's history is closely intertwined with the location, with his connection to Vera, the woman the owner built the Sierra Madre for, being a particularly harrowing revelation of Dead Money's story.
Pretty as a picture.
About tonight, I don't know.
You don't know. I ask one simple favor of you, and you tell me no.
I didn't say no. I just said that I don't think...
You're right, you don't think.
The final companion character of the DLC is Christine. Similar to Dog and God, her story is a similarly disturbing one that immediately generates sympathy through the circumstances by which she's found by the player, released from an automated surgical unit, voiceless and scarred. But her inclusion also greatly serves the narrative through its connection to major elements of Dead Money's story.
Might be why I got moved off to this suite. It's hers. That's her over there. Got trapped by security like I did. Just took a different way out. I've been hunting the one who hijacked your Pip-Boy, Elijah, for some time.
Christine has a connection to Father Elijah, Vera, Dean Domino, and the Big Empty, the setting of another one of New Vegas' expansions with aspects that tie directly into the story of the Sierra Madre's construction. She's a well-designed character who develops alongside the progression of the main plot, and probably my favorite supporting character of the DLC.
He saw me, before the scars, at a place far from here. It's where he found some of the technology he uses now. It's a place called the Big Empty. The name's deceptive, if you know where to look.
Aside from the clunky explosive necklaces they're wearing, the most prominent threat this cast of characters must contend with are the Ghost People. The name of this enemy type alone connotes the motif of a supernatural entity, but through investigation, we can glean insight into their horrifying creation and its relevance to Sierra Madre's grander story. The Ghost People are comprised of former construction workers and guests of the Sierra Madre. People who equipped hazmat suits for protection against the rust-colored toxin that is now blanketing the streets. Both the suits and the toxin, creations of a corporation called Big MT, whose funding into the Sierra Madre's construction was offered in exchange for use of the location's grounds, to conduct experiments on its unknowing occupants. Whilst the exact nature of the Ghost People's creation is not fully clarified, we do learn that through a combination of poorly designed locking mechanisms, ineffective respirators, and prolonged exposure to the toxin, left them forever changed and twisted by its effects, trapped in the very suits that were supposed to protect them. And in the wake of the Great War, The Sierra Madre's equally poorly constructed ventilation system began to break down, leaving the toxin to spread unconstrained. It grew in concentration and size until it eventually covered the entirety of the Sierra Madre in a red clouded fog, with only its ghostly inhabitants left wandering its streets. It's a backstory that not only contextualizes the harrowing nature of the setting, but also maintains thematic continuity with both the horror genre and the Fallout series at large, with the idea of corporate experiments being used on unaware test subjects being not only a scary premise, but equally a staple of the franchise. In terms of gameplay, the Ghost People make up the majority of Dead Money's combat encounters. Obsidian made adjustments to ensure their design aligned with the horror theming. Visually, they move with uncomfortable conviction, staggering restlessly towards the player, their breathing laboured and heavy, connoting a creepiness while emphasizing the restrictions brought upon by the bulky hazmat suits and ineffective respirator masks. Defeating the Ghost People also borrows iconic elements from both Resident Evil and Dead Space, the former being the temporarily unconscious state they fall into when downed, the latter being the requirement to remove a limb during this state to ensure they stay dead. I found this to be a memorable and unique aspect of these enemies, and it greatly heightened the intensity of the encounters, especially when dealing with multiple Ghost People at once, as if you don't quickly target them whilst they're unconscious, they'll rejoin the fight. It forces you to prioritize your attacks to avoid becoming overwhelmed by their numbers. But the Ghost People aren't the only ones who haunt the Sierra Madre. Throughout our journey into the heart of the casino, the player will stumble upon holograms, echoes of the past that each served a pre-war purpose. Each type used to highlight a different aspect of Dead Money's design. Some bartenders and shopkeepers with no drinks to pour and nothing left to trade, ominously waiting for customers that will never arrive. Their presence adds to the horror tone through their relevance and reference to a world that was lost to destruction and time. Others serve a more gameplay-centric purpose, security holograms that cannot be destroyed by conventional means, leading back into the aspect of player vulnerability, since you cannot deal direct damage and must locate and dismantle control units that are tucked away in the environment. Another hologram serves both of these purposes, whilst also linking directly to a key character within the story. As you reach the residential hotel section of the Sierra Madre Casino, you'll eventually encounter a hologram of Vera, the woman Dead Money's entire setting was constructed for. A construction motivated by the owner, Frederick Sinclair, and his intoxicated love for her. This hologram now trapped in a looping state of panic on the day the bombs dropped, left guarding the upper floors of the casino as she calls out for her missing partner.
Sinclair? Sinclair, I'm trapped. Please. Oh god, the security systems won't let me out.
It's a creepy but ingenious inclusion that essentially acts as Fallout's version of a ghost, with the holograms haunting the nearby skeleton of the woman their likeness belonged to. When looking at the horror genre specifically, we can identify 5 motifs that continuously appear: isolation, supernatural, psychological, gothic, and body horror. Most stories will typically borrow from 1 or 2 of these, but Dead Money draws aspects from all of them in a uniquely Fallout way. The DLC is a great example of how to take a series that occasionally has disturbing moments and embrace them by placing them at the center of the experience. Whilst I understand and respect the opinions of those who feel either mixed or outright dislike this DLC, I do think it was brave of Obsidian to create something that actively changes some of the aspects that are synonymous with the base game, intentionally making things less accessible for the player and raising the conversation of balance between objective and subjective game design. I personally really enjoy the change in approach in its bite-sized nature, especially as a horror fan.
Ghost in name and image. Still a looker, though.
But what are your thoughts on Dead Money? Did you like it, and if not, which of New Vegas's DLCs is your favourite and least favourite? Thanks for watching this video. It's been really fulfilling looking at this DLC with more granular detail, and I hope you likewise enjoyed it. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe to join the great community we're building. And until next time, I'll see you later.